Well, everybody knows the Zimbabwean voice now, so that's for sure. And it's a beautiful voice, that one. One of unity, one of togetherness, one of peace, one of love, you know. That's the way forward. Oga, Oga.
Tendai, thank you so much for being here with me. Before I introduce yourself, the reason why, in fact, I have a friend, Yara, who was visiting you in Norway recently, and she said you have to interview Tendai. And of course, I had a conversation with her quite recently, and she could feel like the vibes that you were giving, that like, they have to be on this podcast. So, how are you doing, and what's been happening?
Man, I've been doing great, but I feel like I've just been running. Like I told you earlier, Dumi, I'm tired of airports because I've been in Paris, I've been in Copenhagen, I've been in Zimbabwe, and constantly having to then come back and reproducing work. But in that, I'm not tired in the sense that it is wearing me down. I'm tired in the sense that I want to change the status quo.
What status
about what wellness and yoga is.
That's actually why I wanted to have this conversation. Well, I was doing my research in terms of like, I always look at what's the, not angle, but what is like the thing that we're trying to extract from the conversation. And for me, the biggest thing, and it hit me, and I think before I say what it is, I think it's been the missing piece to, I've always been trying to figure out what is Zimbabwe's problem? Like, what is the issue? Where are we going wrong? What aren't we learning from? And I think the thing that became apparent to me as I was looking through the research that I was doing with all the vibes that you're putting out, it's healing. We haven't healed. There's no healing. So what we have is like a bunch of hurt people hurting people, you know? And then I was like, oh, okay. So when yoga as a man, as an African man, it seems very woo-woo or like, you know what I mean? But then really, like when I was doing my research, I was looking about you, it's just an avenue to self-understanding. It's a vehicle. So
yes, 100%.
So yeah. So you talked about changing the status quo. Where did that come from? That like illumination come from?
It came from many different places. But when I was younger, I was 11 years old. My mom slipped discs in her C7 and in her lower back. And she had to rear off the side of the road. And she had to call my dad for emergency services. My father came and she was immediately rushed into surgery. The surgery lasted a very long time. And it broke my heart because seeing your pillar of strength break down was hard for an 11-year-old girl. I had to now come to the understanding that children get bigger, but our hearts get torn up. We can have adults who have credit cards and just how we are, credit cards and your life, you have all the cars, you have all the money that you have, but it doesn't help if your body and your life is not in order. If your character and your personality are not adherent with who you are as a person. And this actually comes into what yoga teaches us. It is living with the values of what you truly know as a human being, as you that has been put onto this earth to produce and be within your own purpose. It took me aback when I was younger because her neurologist suggested yoga as a form of rehabilitation. I went with her to all of her sessions and seeing my mom come from a space of not only pity and worthlessness, but having her mindset that was so determined to walk. I saw my mom coming from the bedroom to the fridge and all of us clapping hands for her. I saw my mom getting into a swimming pool and elating. when I was that age, it showed me what courage and bravery was in order to do what has to be done for you to live a fulfilled life.
I love that. And when I was doing my research, you kind of talked about the neurologist. She spoke about steps. She talked about how there was that injury that happened when she slipped her disc, but that injury happened way before the actual event. So maybe speak on that and what that event was that led to that traumatic experience.
When my mom was 7 months pregnant for my brother's 8 years older than me. She slipped discs in her, she fell over some steps and she broke her tailbone. The injury was perpetuating itself throughout the days, but she didn't notice it because she was on autopilot. She was also just going on her days as just a mother that had to do things for her children and also running a successful business. By the time this day came, when she was rearing off the side of the road, she didn't understand that this was actually something that has happened before. It reminds me a lot about how a lot of us are working on autopilot.
Yeah.
We don't know
just moving
who we actually are in our core. Because you constantly just be going through life. You're going over to the grocery store. You're going over to CrossFit. You're going over to the gym. You're meeting your friends. But what's actually happening inside your body? A lot of us are not taking care of that. And that's why I deal in functional movement, where yoga for me is not just a woohoo thing. It is, how do you pick up things from the top shelf? Because this movement actually still requires you to bring over your transverse muscles. You're still working with your triceps, your biceps. You're still working with your neck muscles. You're still working with your multifidii. So all of these muscles are in conjunction with one another. How do you have longevity with your body? And are you ignoring that because it's only for pleasure? And this already brings about your mindset. Do you want to be here for a long time? Or are you here for a good time and a long time?
Another time. Yeah. I feel like self-awareness comes, it's a journey, right? It doesn't just happen. It kind of, you learn to become more self-aware if you have the privilege enough to get to that point. So I want to ask two questions. The first of which is, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself so that everyone has a little bit of context around who you are, where you're from, and why you are in this moment where you are. And then after that, I'm going to take it back to your grandfather, because I feel like his story, there's a lot of his story intertwines into you being where you are right now today. So who is Tendai? Where is she in the world? And what does she bring to the world right now?
Hello, my name is Tendai Jambga-Rokkones. I'm a wellness curator, yoga teacher, and an international public speaker. I am incredibly self-aware, an avid reader, and I'm confident in who I am because I know my purpose. My purpose is to bring more enlightenment to the world about who we should conduct ourselves as, in who you think that you should. I don't believe in the should haves and could haves. I believe in what do you know for yourself and how are you able to bring that through? Because we are stronger in our diversity. We are stronger in our diverse purposes because that is what brings the world further. I also believe that we should never shrink for another person because you are your own teacher. And this is something that I bring out in my own yoga classes.
You are your own teacher.
You're your own teacher.
Because no one can live the way you have your own unique experiences. Therefore, only you can learn from the things that you've been through.
Yes. 100%. There's nobody that knows you like you know yourself.
Yes.
Why should you then listen to what society says? What should you then listen to why the governments are saying to you? And I say that honestly, very cautionary, because I understand that my parents will probably be watching this. Sorry, mom and dad. But you have to understand who you are at your own core. Otherwise, you will not succeed. It is the unbridled determination that makes societies move further. So you knowing yourself allows a society to move further. It allows your communities to move further, because ultimately it comes into, if you shrink, who are the people going to listen to? Who is going to be the inspired one? The motivated one? So I'm also living in Norway at the moment. My husband is Norwegian. I met him in 2013. And yeah, by hook or by crook, I'm living with him now. Got married in 2019, but this is the place that I should have been. And this is why I believe that nothing happens by coincidence.
I love that. With regards to, firstly, I love that intro. It was very energizing. I love it. With regards to people coming to that self-awareness, as I was saying earlier, sometimes, like, I look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you and I, are blessed enough in such a way whereby there are certain people that came before us to some degree that have really like climbed survival, and of course all of the various platforms of the triangle, and now we are blessed enough to be at the top of that triangle and attempt each day to try and self-actualize in the best way that we can, not just for ourselves but for the world at large. But we need to, and that's a blessing, but to understand that we need to figure out where a person came from. So talk to me about your grandfather. Talk to me about your grandfather, what he was like. I think he was a big figure in your life.
A massive influence in my life. My grandfather was a giant that fell. But in my life, it's a giant that actually still exists. Ooh. This man he's present in every single thing that I do. He came from Nyadiri. He lived in a village and he was part of the missionary schools. He was a choir member as well as the vice president for Silvera House, as well as the teacher program. He was also part of bringing over the hospital administration within Nyadiri. And one day, somebody came about and heard him singing. And he ended up going to get 3 other people to join his quartet. It makes me so emotional because I can't fathom how somebody with this nature, but I do understand it, with the fervor that he had to bring things about, because he was a dreamer. He was the one to bring about the quartet, and it came over to be the Ambassadors Quartet. They then traveled to over 26 different European countries, as well as the United States. His album was only produced in New York and then in Norway. And I have the only other existing record in Norway that was translated.
And what is that translated in English? It says, so the Quartet of Rhodesia. That's so.
Yes. So now this is also something that I do need to bring more dignity towards. And I understand a part of my purpose in this matter, because it was translated into Nege Kroteten fra Rhodesia, which we can all understand the connotations there.
Right.
So I'm in the process of writing an article about what it means to have dignity as his granddaughter that's living in Norway.
You know what's wild is that you think the things that you do in your life sometimes just exist for today and maybe your immediate, but the things you do now, they literally ripple through eternity. So you're sitting here in Norway, and you travel. And then you told me a story earlier offline about how the person that, I think the engineer of that album knew, maybe speak to us a little bit about that so I don't mess up the story.
Yeah, he actually lives in the same neighborhood as my husband. And he's still alive today. So the person that met my grandfather, who produced the album, who was there as they were recording it, lives in the same neighborhood. We're going to go meet him in a couple of weeks. And this is why I do feel as though it's very important for my article and to put it worldwide.
You mentioned that after, of course, he did all of this, like you were singing around the world, representing the Zimbabwean voice, as it were. He, of course, became an ambassador and traveled the world, showcasing Zimbabwe. And in many ways, I think from what I can see in your life, to some degree, did you try and emulate him a lot in terms of how you tried to live your life, at least in the early stages of your career, if I can call it that way? Did you try and emulate him a lot, or am I getting ahead of myself?
No, you're not getting ahead of yourself. In my beginning days, I went over to University of Sydney. I studied law and global and international studies. I wanted to become a diplomat, the same as my grandfather. I then have always thought about myself as somebody who's able to dissolve conflicts or is able to understand both sides. And it was very poignant for me a couple of years ago, where I was chosen to be a speaker for Christian Dior and UNESCO, because my grandfather was the ambassador from Zimbabwe, France, Zimbabwe to France, the Vatican, and UNESCO. And the place in which the building that was chosen for his embassy in Paris was actually chosen by my grandfather, and I was living right next to it.
Wild.
So I feel him all the time.
Does that ever trip you out a little bit?
100%. Yeah. I don't think it would trip. I think it would trip every single person out, because my grandfather was such a, he truly has my heart. And it's the same thing with my dad and my mom. They have shaped me in a way where I am able to understand the world from a different perspective. And sometimes that does come off as polarizing for a lot of people. But I know what I have to do. And I also understand my own process of living. I'm glad and I'm incredibly blessed to have the people around me that understand that.
That's phenomenal. And we spoke about your grandfather, of course. And what were your parents? What are your parents like? And what was your upbringing like?
Oh, my parents are incredible. My mother is the one who, when I was wearing very long clothes, long skirts, would say, "Tendai, you have a great body." Please.
People need to see what you say.
But my mother says that she prayed for me. She said that I asked for a daughter with a heart of gold, that is able to move through life in the way that you are doing right now. My dad gave me the understanding of business. My dad talks to me in a very business way. He'll very much startup. And I get it. I love it. He also gives me the life advice where I don't really care a lot about what other people have to say. My mom is incredibly compassionate. She will show me how the empathy and the understanding of who other people are and how to connect with them. And that's where the yoga space comes in. My dad, he'll be like, "Okay, this is great. This is what you're doing for yoga and wellness. Now this is how you profit on it. This is how you capitalize, right?
We need to make a living here, so let's.
This is your deal, honey. Like, no money is made only on a compassion and empathy, honey."
Get this bread. I love it. Oh, that's so good. And did you have a happy childhood?
Amazing childhood. My greatest memory actually is just being at home and roller skating on the tennis court and climbing the trees. Inside my home in Zimbabwe, we have mulberry tree, papaya tree, guava tree. We have an amazing garden, and the monkeys come regularly over to our house. Like every week you'll see monkeys, and it's a whole family of them. And my dad will constantly say, no, don't disturb the monkeys. And this one time, oh, I hope I can tell the story. This one time my mom was cutting up carrots in the back. And she kept saying, Tendai, why are you taking my carrots? Because we're cooking together. I said, Mom, I'm not taking the carrots. She looks up and sees the monkeys with the carrots. So it's fun. Glenlorne is my place. It's my home. Going home feels like love.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think that's the only foundation a child could ever need, right? Love, acceptance, and then the embrace of like a loving family, right? I think it's with that foundation that you go out into the world to then, but then I was doing some of my reading. Even though you can have love and a warm embrace and a roof over your head and people to look up to that can inspire you, you still have to find your why, right?
Exactly.
What was that? Because you traveled a lot, and I was trying to figure out what did you find? Where did you go, and what did you find when you were out there?
Well, it's interesting that you even mentioned my why, because this is exactly my tattoo. This is a circumpunct, and in the middle actually means what the why is. So everybody else is around here, but who are you? And what is your why? So I'm always constantly reminded about what is my why. I have traveled to many places. I have been in Mauritius, Seychelles, London, Bali, Italy. I did my internship at. I have been in Norway, obviously, as well as Australia. So many places, so many. But during that time, I was finding my why. It was hard because, our brain doesn't actually fully develop up until we are 26 years old, our frontal cortex. And my dad would always say to me whenever I left home, remember who you are and remember where you come from.
Oh, Mr. Jambga with the jewels, man.
Oh, man. Seriously.
Yeah.
Seriously. He would say to me, you are an ambassador for not only your family, but for Zimbabwe. So I was brought up hearing that constantly, which in the beginning felt like, oh my gosh, I'm not able to understand who I am outside of Zimbabwe or outside of my family. But as I matured, I started to understand that that is the only thing that really matters. That I have to know who I am, otherwise you're going to get swallowed.
Yes.
By what society is saying to you in the other countries that you're going to. I've traveled extensively because I believe that formal education is not the only thing that matters.
Yes. Yes.
I believe that when you meet other people, other cultures, other people with their own worldviews, then that is what true education is. I've had to come to the understanding now that knowing who I am is my family, and it is being rooted. You talked about the hierarchy of needs. You talked about Maslow's hierarchy. That is the same thing about the chakras within yoga.
Wow.
Because your bottom chakra deals with your root and your space of safety and security. When you go all the way up, it actually deals with your your dreamer's aspect, that you have the space to dream who you want to be.
Once you've addressed all of the other.
Yes. You can't actually be a dreamer if you're struggling for food.
Yeah.
If you don't have the housing that you need, if you don't feel secure financially, or you don't have the safety or belonging. And that is something that I strive for. I wanted to be that.
So then what did you, when you went around looking for answers and you got all of this information, what was your why? How did you distill that as like, okay, I've gone around the world, I've seen many things, now this is my why?
My why is, I'm Tendai Jambga-Rokkones, and I'm here to bring enlightenment towards the people that I come to, because ultimately we don't have the kindness and the compassion that we need in other people's lives. I want to be the person that brings kindness when there's nothing else there. The person that brings hope. And it's the reason that I teach to special populations within yoga, the people that are on wheelchairs, the people who have a form of disability, the people who have gone through trauma. The world already in yoga and wellness caters to the status quo of able-bodied people.
Yes.
You have to go over to the 5th page in Google in order just to see somebody in a wheelchair. The rest of those pages are only just white people who are in these amazing postures.
I feel like yoga has been white. I was thinking about this before this morning. I feel like yoga needs rebranding. Like it needs to be rebranded, and it's almost become like whitewashed in the sense that it's like a medium that is reserved for people or a few, and which when I started to look into some of the stuff that you're doing, I realized it's actually wrong. It's actually universal. But I want you to touch on the story around how you got, you mentioned something that was very powerful. You said, what's for you is for you. And you got a scholarship to bring yoga to Zimbabwe. Tell us about how that story, and then what made you realize that, man, everything that is for me will be for me. Just tell us about that story.
That was actually crazy, because I was sitting at home and I've always loved yoga and well-being. I was now checking my budget and thinking, okay, 4,000 USD at the age of like 25, I can't do this. Plus going into Bali and my flight tickets. Oh, and then I just applied. I had applied for a partial scholarship because I was like, okay, I have this in my budget to do half of it. I was sitting there drinking ginger tea and thinking to myself, I pray that this goes through. I sat with the director of the school and she said to me, all right, tonight, let's go through the interview. We did the interview and then Zessa went. I was like, really? How is this happening to me? Went over, turned on the generator, the usual Zimbabwean stuff. Like, we know what it is. Ended up coming back onto the interview. We continued. She said to me, it's okay. I'm actually in India at the moment. This is the things that happen. I understand. But before we could even continue with the interview, she said to me, Tendai, I would love to give you a full scholarship. And we're also going to pay for your flight tickets. When I came back to Zimbabwe, the only condition was that I come back and I teach in Zimbabwe and that I give free classes to people.
I want to talk about privilege, if I can call it that, right? Privilege that one is able to go abroad, learn. I think everyone has a function to play in Zimbabwe society. You know, you are blessed enough that you could be in the middle, in Asia, get a scholarship to bring back yoga, which is perceived as a privileged thing, right? But you're able to use that skill set and be a blessing to people that you're of service to. what was the biggest thing that you learned about yourself and also some of the clients that you were serving when you were going through that process?
I think that at this point I think it's important to note that yoga is not only in India. That Kemetic yoga, which comes between Rwanda, Tanzania, all the way down, actually originated in Africa, and it predates Africa by 1,000 years.
Ooh.
So having that understanding, when you look at the trade system that actually happens, the Indians used to call, whilst trading gold, this Sena people.
Yes.
That's what, and it's still the same name in Sanskrit. So yoga does not predominantly come from India.
Mind blown.
It is a function, and even if you see this, yoga doesn't have to be practiced in the same way as which we have seen in a studio. That is the whitewashing of it. That's the commercialization of it. Yoga was an export that came about during the 1940s and sold over to the United States. And on the backdrop of Black emancipation, you also had the suffrage of white feminism. We also had the hippie movement. This was in the 1970s. That's who also popularized it. Then it also became something where women could do, mainly because of the only woman that could do it. Yoga was only predominantly made for men. And this is why the postures in yoga don't adhere to women's bodies. So how could it adhere to African women's bodies? Whenever I'm dealing with a yoga topic, I have to look back into the yoga history. Yoga is whitewashed.
Yes.
Because that is the status quo. And it comes into the privilege and the luxury of paying for it. When I was in Zimbabwe and giving my sessions, I would say to people, if you cannot afford it, that is okay. Pay me whatever you have. And there were days that I would get rice or eggs as my payment. And that was okay for me. Ultimately, it's important for you just to be getting your sessions, getting the movement in. So I really wanted to address that first. In terms of, I do also want to bring this up, the pushback that I even got from Zimbabwe was yoga's only for white people. I was on ZFM, I was on different radio stations, I was on TV, ZBC, and a lot of the questions came in to say, yeah, but you're allowing the devil in. That this is not Christian to do yoga.
Oh, man.
And I had to go back into the drawing board to actually go into my own mind to say, hold on, is meditation bad or is it good? What did Moses do when he got the 10 Commandments? He went over into the hills to go and meditate. Your space of safety and stillness, and where you become more understanding of your own body, where you gain your self-awareness, where you are able to understand your own emotions, comes when you're only still. But when you're in a community where a lot of things are only chaotic,
how can you be still?
How can you be still?
Chaos and turbulence is all I know. So you asked me to be still. How?
How? The very first, in the Yoga Sutras, it says, the meaning of yoga is to drown out the noise. It is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. I love that definition. However, the process to do that is movement. The process to do that is actually separating yourself from a whole group of people in order to still come out greater. Because you what? You know your own purpose.
Like I have to move every morning. Every morning I have to, and for 2 years I wasn't moving, and I was pouring from an empty cup for a long time. And like, what changed? Like your movement, you weren't using your body. Oof. And then okay, and in fact, in many ways, yoga is though if there's a place that's needed more than anyway, it's in places of chaos.
Exactly. So you did bring up privilege.
Yeah.
Privilege is that, that I was able to find a place where I could get a scholarship and bring it back. And for a long time, I was called the only Black yoga teacher in Zimbabwe. I was also known as Zimbabwe's yoga queen, which was brought about in the Herald by an amazing, amazing journalist. However, I have to take a step back and realize that Tinashe was already there before me, and he's a male Black yoga teacher. This idea that you even need to say a Black yoga teacher tells you what's wrong with the industry.
Yes, or the medium or practice in and of itself globally.
Oof. The way I see it, it's kind of like
as I was saying to you earlier, these are all tools to self-awareness and self-understanding. I think for me, what works a lot is, I think journaling. When I was doing my reading about you, you said people you should write. I used to journal when I was 17, and it was in fact my role model is 17-year-old version of myself. That guy was like, so I used to journal when I was 17, and then for 11 years I didn't touch a piece of paper, and then I started journaling again 2 years ago. And just the self-awareness and self-understanding that it brought I was like, oh goodness me, that's what I've been for 10 years. I've been on autopilot, and I haven't been. But when you start writing, you start to say, okay, I see what's been the common thread throughout everything that I've been doing in autopilot. There's something that's there that needs to be addressed and leaned into. So that's my process, and maybe I'll go for therapy as well. But journaling is free, right? Journaling is free.
It is. Plus, this is something within yoga, the Yoga Sutras. We have the 8-limbed yoga process, which is, the first one is the niyamas and yamas. So that comes into your cleanliness. How do you address somebody? And the very first principle is ahimsa, which means non-violence. Non-violence, you will think that this is violence towards another person, but it's also non-violence towards yourself and your own thoughts. What are you telling yourself about yourself? Because your body actually listens to your own thoughts. If you're telling yourself that you are worthless, that you don't deserve anything, or even those little moments where you're like, I'm such an idiot. Guess what?
It manifests in your body.
It manifests. And the thing about thoughts is that they manifest into your personality and then your character, and then you start acting it out. If you already think that you're worthless, you will act like it. So everything begins in your thought. What is your thought process about you? How do you manifest yourself into reality? The next one comes into your asanas. So that is the movement that you have. Another one is your pranayama. That comes into your breath work. Have you ever noticed that whenever you are feeling incredibly stressed or you're scared, your breath becomes shallow? You'll constantly be like, especially with anxiety attacks. Training your breath, training your diaphragm muscle to actually work with your own body is a lifesaver, because then you're able to be more discerning as well as more controlled in the situations that you're not comfortable in. even within job interviews. And this is where it becomes important. It then goes into your meditation, or then into your, how are you able to control your own aspect of your being. I love the yoga process. And this comes to me as more beneficial than being a diplomat for myself, because that is where conflict resolution comes. You cannot have conflict resolution if you are in conflict with yourself.
How can you fix conflict if you
the same way as if you cannot show another person love if you do not love yourself?
Yeah, I know in the Bible it says love your neighbor as yourself, and if you don't love yourself, how can you love your neighbor?
Yes.
You mentioned something when I was kind of looking into, you said something around how, even earlier in this conversation, you said we're all, and the older I realize, I think this is very true. We never really grow up. We just learn how to act in public. You know, when we honestly,
we do.
We just learn how to act in public. We never really. I always think, when would I feel like I'm doing that? When would I feel like I feel exactly the same as I did when I was, but my age keeps going up, but my spirit feels youthful. And I realized, okay, we never really grow up. You said something around, our bodies get bigger, but our hearts,
get torn up.
The hearts get torn up. Oof. And that hit me so hard, because then I heard that piece, and then I heard the piece around steps. You talked about how your mom was way back when started getting into yoga, and then your neurologist was saying, this injury happened 20 odd years ago. So then I started thinking about, oh man, in Zimbabwe, a lot of the frustrations and the lack of development and a lot of the things that are holding us back, I think stem from unresolved trauma.
Yes.
What's your take on that?
You've just said it. If we do not heal from what colonization did to us, if we do not heal from even our fathers that went fighting in the Chimurenga, if we do not heal and still went over to our families and you still expect love, it's not going to happen, because there's so much trauma over there. Gukura Hundi, there's too much. There's still going to be animosity inside your own heart, and generational trauma exists because you are only taught what you're taught. You don't know what you don't know. Viola Davis talked about this. You don't know what you don't know. You will have to get taught it. If you are not taught how to deal with your own trauma, if you're also not taught that your trauma is not the fault of you, that is something outside of you. Your body has already created the neural pathways that make you feel that this is the only way to behave and how to work in society and how to be. We can't expect kindness and love and compassion from those who have been hurt.
Absolutely. And with trauma, like with the physical injury, you know when you're hurt, therefore you know, oh, I'm going to just go for physio and then after that I'll be cool. But if you don't even know that you're hurting, how can you possibly heal? Like I was like, but maybe healing is the answer. But if you don't even know that you're broken.
But this is the important part, is that injuries don't only happen physically. Injuries happen emotionally, mentally, as well as spiritually. When your soul is broken, when somebody's telling you, and this is just an example, when somebody tells you you can't do that, you feel it emotionally, but also your spirit gets broken. This is why it's important to ask the question, what happened to you? You can have an A-star person who is running the world. Well, not the world, but a child who is doing amazing in work, in life. If their boss is manipulative, is narcissistic or a misogynist, you will feel as though you cannot strive further than what they are doing because you've lost hope. Helplessness, hopelessness, as well as the feeling that you are underestimated feeds into your psyche.
Ooh, you hit me. You said, if you feel you're underestimated, you will walk like an underestimated person into the world. And that's a chip, and it's a dangerous. Ooh, I'm literally going to therapy about this stuff.
But this is where it comes into your mindset. Because if you,
I don't want to walk around with the chip on my shoulder. I do not want to walk around with the chip on my shoulder. That's not the person. But you need to know that you have a chip on your shoulder.
Exactly. And you then also need to understand what to do with that chip. Are you actually going to feel like, oh, this chip has now become a big boulder? Or are you going to say, come on, this person doesn't know what they're talking about, because you know your purpose, because you know your spirit, because you know your own emotions. As I said earlier, we all need to understand who we are and what we're put on this earth to do. And that is what takes you further.
How do we do that? Some person might be listening to this and saying, like, man, this is great, but how do I do it? Do I journal? What tools can we give people to understand that truth?
So these are the tools. You learn how to journal. That is called Svadhyaya within yoga, the Yoga Sutras. It's one of the tools. So journaling, which is self-study. Start with your history. Where were you born? Who are you? What were your first thoughts? Who do you know yourself to be? Ask yourself the poignant questions. And if you need any journal prompts, contact me. I'm happy to give them to you. Next comes into movement. Understand your body and trust your body as you are the authority. So that you can also live a long life. The next one comes into controlling your breath. The determination comes next. Understanding from your journaling how you are able to conduct your life and where you're going to. This comes into your tunnel vision. Then it comes into your meditation. It's hard to meditate. I know this because it's hard to sit with yourself. It's hard.
Reach.
Like, how are you going to sit with yourself with nothing that's giving you the stimulation? But that is pratyahara, which pratyahara is complete lack of the stimulation that's around you. So you, all of the senses, where it comes into, all 5 senses. And then repairing. The reparations that you need to do in your life so that you have no debt. A lot of people like to think about debt only financially. Debts also have to deal with what you haven't said.
Open that up, Pastor. Say that a little bit more on there. You say what you haven't said.
Because we can have a block in our throat chakra. And that is what causes headaches, or what also causes any problems in the jaw or any throat issues. So when you have been brought up to just be the most composed guy, the most composed girl, when you become an adult, you don't know how to work and how to deal with situations. You don't know, you keep quiet if somebody is dealing with a conflict. You keep quiet. Silence is not your friend, because people can hurt you and say that you loved it. So it comes into owning who you are and saying your piece, because that will take you further.
This is one song by Oliver Mtukudzi, of course, who you know, and then like the chorus is like and the bass is like you've heard, your brain is hurting, but that is not the problem. so it's literally, it's just talking yoga talk. It's like you find like, man, I got a headache, but the headache isn't the issue, my guy. So then he goes further to say you need to go back and figure out what is the root cause that is manifesting in your physical being. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I think we like to box yoga into like that, but it's actually like a universal truth. The universal truths that are given through this medium, you know?
Yes, you're completely correct. And this is why I say that yoga is not completely only from India, or it's not the status quo that we've seen that is whitewashed. Yoga is in dancing. Yoga is what you see when you go kumusha. Yoga is the steps that are taken. Yoga is putting your hands in soil. Yoga is working on your dreams. That is what true yoga is. Yoga is not only done on your mat inside the studio. It's how you behave outside.
In that journey of repair, there are a lot of things that you can discover about yourself and a lot of highs and lows. What was your greatest high? What was your greatest low?
My greatest high to date has actually been speaking at UNESCO with Women at Dior. To this day, I've been doing this for 2 years. Amazing. I can't believe that I got to speak in the same place that my grandfather got to speak in. Blessings upon blessings. My greatest low was actually moving to Norway at the peak of the pandemic during a lockdown, and having to understand a whole new culture, having to be the different one. And, you know, I'm proud of myself for that, because this is where my yoga really came in. Because we like to think about yoga, as I said, on the mat, but it was a real test for me. I learned Norwegian in 8 months, got all the certificates. And I'm able to ski, I'm able to do a whole bunch of things. But being a part of the culture and having to really separate my mind into saying this is where I am and I'm away from home. And also during coronavirus, where we weren't able to travel. I'm a travel bunny. So that was difficult.
I actually wrote down in my notes, because I think you and I were different people, but we're in similar situations whereby we've moved to new spaces, and in any new space there can be a ton of change. Similar to you, getting married, turning 30, moving to new countries, new cities. It's just everything is moving extremely quickly. And I was talking to my cousin, and she was talking about like how I can imagine with any new space that you're desperate to clutch onto things that bring anchoring and some sort of stability, to say, okay, everything is moving. How can I find to anchor me? What have you used? I mean, so I think you answered the question already. Has yoga been the anchor that you have used to deal and cope?
Mainly it's yoga as well as my mindset. It's also been the thing of me to prove people wrong. I guess that comes from my dad.
Say more about proving people wrong. What do you mean by that?
Showing that in a white place, in a place of complete privilege, Norway is one of the richest, this is the richest place in the world, the richest country, that I was not, I was not only going to be looked at as the good immigrant, but also I never understood in my first couple of months being here why the word immigrant was also put around. So just to give you some context, when you first arrive to Norway, there is a program that you have to go through, and it's basically assimilation.
Assimilating the culture, right?
You have to go through Norwegian courses. You have to go through what it is to be Norwegian. And in the middle of it, because in the beginning I was a happy clapper. I was like, of course I can do this.
Yeah.
In the middle of it, I said to myself, I'm not Norwegian and I don't want to be.
And that's okay.
I'm Zimbabwean.
That's okay. Mm-hmm.
And it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
That I also don't have to assimilate to what other people need me to be.
Mm-hmm.
I can be great on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when I let go of that expectation of what other people wanted me to be,
mm-hmm.
is when I was able to speak clearly in Norwegian. I was able to understand my own process and just be myself. Because the only thing inevitable about life is change.
Absolutely.
Change will always come.
Yep.
But did I want this change to only be dictated to me?
Oh.
Or did I want to be in control of it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I had to take a handle of.
That's a beautiful thing. It's like you almost want to dictate to it. And the worst thing a person can ever do, the older, I mean, when I grew up, in fact, to some degree, a lot of us, you get taught to do this. Like there's this innate human desire to want to fit in and be a part of something, you know. But it's okay to want to be a part of something. But the worst thing you can try and do is reduce yourself for the sake of fitting in. That's the worst. Be yourself.
But even more so, be decidedly different.
Intentionally, exactly. Don't blend in. Don't blend in. Don't blend in. It's the worst thing you could do to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it takes that truth. It takes courage to walk in that truth.
Yeah, it does. It takes courage. And I've got a brave lion heart. And it is something that my dad always says to me is if the crowd is walking in masses along one way, you go the other way. You understand who you are first, and then you decide for yourself. It's also something that was in Kanye's trilogy. Because this is what Donda said to him. And that's where I got it from, where it was decidedly different. And this is what's on my Instagram bio, where I say soft and decidedly different. You don't have to be like anybody else in this world because each person is confused. I can honestly tell this to you. People,
everyone's figuring it out, man.
Everyone's figuring it out.
Everyone's figuring this life thing out. That's a gift. That's not a problem. That's a gift. It's up to you. It's up to you to figure it out on your terms in your learnings. To bring us full circle, Tendai, Zimbabwe, the place we call home. We all have a role to play in its story. What does shifting its story for the positive, what does that mean to you, or what does it look like for you?
For me, that actually means putting Zimbabwe front and center and actually putting the bodies front and center. It comes into what you are doing with this podcast. But for me, in the space of wellness, it also means putting the ingredients. So I do have a company coming up, and the focus will be on Zimbabwe.
And how can we get behind you and help you out with your endeavors? Should we follow you on Instagram? Should we just stay tuned? How can we help?
Follow me on Instagram, but also when my company launches, buy it.
Yep.
Buy it.
Yeah. Tendai, thank you so much for your time. I feel infinitely richer just because I was able to share this conversation with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dewey.
Namaste.
Namaste. Do you know Tinder?
Mangwanani. Oga. Pandinomuka. Ndokutsvaga uripiko.